Hi, everyone. Today, I'm going to do a demo of a red cardinal, a female, using watercolor and gouache as a underpainting. Been using this process for a few years now, and it's one that I really enjoy. But before I start, I'm going to walk you through some different ways to approach pastels in general with underpaintings. Been doing underpaintings for like I said earlier, for a number of years, not only just on the birds, but with my still lifes, figurative work, and landscapes. It's an interesting process. But the first one I want to start with is one I had used for some still lifes is doing acrylics on gator board. Here's an example of what the acrylic underpainting looked like as I finished just blocking it in. I used a palette knife, large brush, and really I didn't draw this out before I started. I was just looking for large shapes of the objects that I wanted to paint. Here, as you can see, an example of the little creamer here, how you can apply the paint, how thick you can get it, and you can scrape it along with splattering it, rubbing it with paper towels, using a mister, spraying more water on it just to break up the patterns and make for some interesting textural effects. After I get the pumice on, or after the acrylic is dry, then I apply a couple coats of Golden's Fine pumice, and then I start with my pastels. I think here on the little creamer, you can see how nice the pastels adhere to the acrylic backing. And also on the other, next up behind it here in this little vase, you can see how the brushwork from putting the pumice on, it leaves you almost with a brush-like effect when you apply your pastels. So then as I work along here on the little coffee grinder, you can almost see some of the patterns and the textural effects you can get to, I think, just to enhance the subject matter that you're working on. And I believe this here was the final painting. The details of this I've already shared, but here are some other underpaintings on gator board using the acrylics, and just the abstract nature of them. I sometimes almost like the underpaintings more than I do the final pastel pieces. But here you can just see you can have a lot of fun and just laying in these large shapes, different color. Not too concerned because of the drawing aspect of it at the moment, because of the way I work with shapes. I like that when I take a particular shape, I can either add to it or I can subtract from it to get what I want and work back and forth. Pastel being an opaque medium enables you to do this with ease. Sometimes you can take the underpainting, as in the little flower here, and you can even develop it a little bit further as if you were just doing an acrylic painting. But I like to keep it fairly abstract, soft edges. I just get in some major lights and darks of the main shapes that I'm painting. Now, even though this is thick sometimes with acrylic paint, if you feel like it's too thick, you can take a palette knife and scrape off some of the thickness before it dries. But I've found that the pastel really does a great job of sticking to it. This particular process can be used for landscapes. As in this piece, this was at Upper Fish Creek Falls in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. Took a long hike up this trail. The one thing with working with underpaintings outside, especially acrylics, they seem to dry very quickly. So you'll want to take a spray bottle and keep your surface somewhat moist or wet as you're working. And here we have the painting of Upper Fish Creek Falls. The other nice thing about working on gator board with these underpaintings is if you make a mistake, you simply take a wet paper towel or a rag, wipe off the pastel off the area that you don't like, but the underpainting and the pumice are still there, so you can paint over it as soon as it dries. I've also used this particular approach for some figurative work. Here, I just kind of went wild with the colors I was looking for. It was a feather dancer. This particular painting isn't finished, but it gives you a fairly good idea how you can come in and work with the pastel on top of this and break down these larger shapes of acrylic into smaller shapes using your pastel sticks. So here is the one that the process I'm going to use today is using watercolor and gouache on UART. This was a nuthatch, and the underpainting is pretty much transparent watercolor, and then mixed with some titanium white to give me the opaque nature. With watercolor, you can mix gesso, or you can mix gouache. I like to use the titanium white acrylic, but here you can get a feel for how thick this goes on, and for UART paper, it really you really still have a lot of tooth left even after you apply it this thick. I don't have to use pumice on top of the UART like I do the gator board. And here you can see the final product and how thick some of these brush strokes, or excuse me, pastel strokes get in here on top of this. This was a pastel and alcohol. It was the demo I did here a few weeks ago that I shared with everyone using pastel and alcohol as your underpainting. And here in this little nuthatch, I just put one spot of color almost to the next, just giving me a general indicator of where the bird was going to be. And then I come in with a soft brush and alcohol, and I start to kind of fuse these major shapes together. And here you can see the final painting. But here up close, I'd like to share with you just how thick some of this pastel looks. And part of the reason it has that texture look to it is because of the underpainting underneath. And other parts of it is just because of how I laid, how heavy-handed I can get with the pastel on UART paper. Here on this particular piece right here, this is part of the underpainting that's showing through. Then another way to do it is just using watercolor underpainting. This will probably be the third demo I do, is using just the watercolor. And the fourth one will probably be using the gator board and the acrylic so I can share all four of these with you. On this here, I just kind of lay out a roadmap, and I don't always feel that I have to stay with this, but it gives me a general indicator of where the major shapes are going to be. And then I just kind of went wild with the watercolor on this one, just let it all merge together. But then I took a spray bottle with alcohol in it, And as I spray the pigment, as I spray the paper, the pigment has a tendency of separating and gives you those little circle looks into the paper. Another way to do that is just to take a brush that's wet and splatter it, or a toothbrush and splatter it. But you get these neat looking textures. Then I come back in and redefine where my major shapes are going to be and start. And this one, I don't always start with my darks, but this one I started with my darks, just trying to get those blocked in. And then started, as you can see, applying the other pastel. What I do like about using underpaintings is that you can glaze over those colors and let some of those shine through your painting. I just love the look when you see pastels like this, where you have these glazed colors one on top of another, and they're all kind of shining through in some aspects of the painting. And this was the final one. This is something I'll share with you today, is how I get this splatter look with pastel. This isn't with paint, but it's with pastel. Now here is a different way of approaching underpaintings, where I just take a watercolor, and very heavy in some spots, and just apply it in an abstract fashion onto the panel or the paper. When that's dry, I just do a general line of where my bird or whatever subject matter I'm painting might go. And then I start coming in and applying the pastels. This was the finished version. Now, I also use underpaintings in my still lifes, as I mentioned at the beginning, with the acrylic background and gator board. This is on UArt paper, just using watercolor. And I did kind of put, you can see from the lines here, there was just a little bit of an indicator where I was going to have the little vase. And I indicated more with color where the plums were going to go. And it just was really very free with the application of the watercolor. Here's the final painting. And I did cover a lot of the underpainting up, but I left a little bit up here in the upper right-hand corner. Another still life that's done same way. This was a little bit closer to the bird I showed you earlier, just with the abstractness of colors laid down. And in this particular one, I used a little bit of the acrylic on where I thought the plums might be, and just kind of made some suggestions or hints. And then I came in, and here's the creamer. And here you can see I let a little bit of this stuff in the background just show through. And you'll have a little bit of the that underpainting shining through here. Not a whole lot on this. I was pretty heavy-handed here on the plums and getting that opaque look to it. Now here's another one that this was the start of an oil painting that was it was a good size, but I didn't like the direction it was going in, so I had cropped the board down. This was on gator board, and I wanted to do this, just this plate of trout here. So after I used water soluble oils, they dry very quickly, but I waited quite a while this so it was dried before I applied the pumice to it. But when I felt it was dry and there was no problem there, I put a couple coats of the Golden's Fine pumice on, and then I came back in and worked on the fish. Up here on the top part there again, as I showed you on the little vase at the beginning with the acrylic, with the pumice and the strokes of your brush strokes, it almost gives it a feeling that you're using a brush with your pastels. That was kind of a neat look. I liked it. Now, a lot of times I'll get asked on reference material, and I usually will find birds wherever I can find them. We have a lot that comes to the backyard. We have a big waterfall back there and bird feeders. But sometimes I like to take my older paintings, since I work mostly with shape. I like to take the older paintings. This particular sparrow, I reversed it, and I just broke it down into a value pattern that I could look at. And this was the demo I did for the patio group a few weeks back. But it gives me just an indication of where my major shapes, lights and darks are going to be. And with that, I can fool around with it a lot. Here I did a posterization of the colored part of the painting. And I really like this, the way that it's broken down, these major shapes and the warm and cool shapes. So it gets you to start to thinking about when I'm applying shapes and working in the background up against the bird. For example, here on the breast, I know it's going to be fairly dark or in a dark mid-tone, going over to a lighter tone. I can have warm versus cool. You see all types of little patterns that start to take on an identity here. But for today, do a cardinal, and I went ahead and included a photograph here that I liked. The thing with using reference material like this is you don't want to copy it. I don't want to copy this. I just want to use it as a reference so I can make my own painting and what inspires me in this to go down my own path. Here, it's just the basic shapes, but then I went and you put it in Photoshop, you can posterize this, and it breaks down those shapes into different value groups that you can look at. And sometimes I'll draw inspiration from these little pieces. They're the way it's broken down. I can see patterns and shapes, and I might want to follow through on the painting on indicating some of these as I paint this little guy. Sometimes I'm giving you all types of options here. I like just the black and white approach where I'll just look at the value patterns in this and whatever colors I pick to represent this, as long as I get the values right, it should appear as a cardinal or a small bird. And here again, posterizing those shapes, you can see how they're broken down, and how they how you just with a few strokes you can represent this. The materials I'm going to be using, excuse me, I'm going to work on UArt 400 paper. I found this paper a few years back from Terry Ludwig when Belgium Mist was, they were having trouble manufacturing it, and I didn't think I was ever going to see it again. Terry shared this with me, and it's really become one of the papers that I enjoy using the most. For years, I did nothing but work on the smooth side of Canson paper with your medium pastels, Rembrandts, and the transition over the years as these manufacturers made better materials. It was kind of hard at first to branch out to the sanded surfaces, but this particular surface really works well for the way I like to work. Pastels I'm going to be using are by Terry Ludwig. I have a few new pastels and a few other nuggets, maybe from Richardson, Unison, that might be in the box, but the majority of the pastels I use are Terry Ludwig's. I will have some Carbothello pastel pencils, black, white, some grays, orange, red, and maybe a few others, yellows, just whatever I feel the need to. I don't like using pastel pencils a lot, but sometimes on the birds, it enables me to get into some areas with some color that I'm looking for that I might not be able to find in my pastel sticks. The watercolors I'm using are tube watercolors, I believe Winsor Newton for the most part. And the opaque medium will be acrylic titanium white. I have used gesso in the past. I've used the gouache in the past. Gouache gets pretty pricey. So I like using something that if it doesn't quite work out, then I'm not out a lot of money. A couple soft brushes. Palettes. This gives you an example. This is my watercolor and gouache palette. I have this little area here, some reds, alizarin, cad yellow lights, yellow ochres. As we go across the top, I have alizarin crimson, some violets, cerulean ultra, and cobalt blue. In my greens, I get into the sap and the viridian. I have a phthalo blue at the end. I'm always a little reluctant of using too much of that. It's such a strong color and it overpowers things pretty quickly. In the bottom 6 here, I've got a mixture of some Payne's gray, burnt and raw umbers, and I believe a sienna. This is one of the brushes I use. I like an angular brush. It's kind of a soft, I believe it's a Princeton, and it's soft enough that it lays down the color pretty well. But it gives me, with the sharp edges there, if I want to use or get some fine lines or shapes, I can use that point as well as the edge of the brush. My pastel selections, here are some Richardsons here, but most of these on here are from Terry Ludwig. This here, I believe, was his snowbird set that Jeff sent out just before Christmas. I like using that quite a bit, along with a selection of colors that Terry had sent with some turquoises, blues, and some grays. I also have some of his different greens, and then just the hodgepodge mixture. I probably won't be using today any of the Richardsons up here, unless I find in some of those areas I might need a particular value that I can turn to. So with that piece of UArt 400, I'm working upright. So I'm going to start off here by just indicating where I think the top of this bird will be. I'm just kind of getting I'm not going to be real concerned with my drawing. I just want to get the general placement of where everything's going to be. And if I can get that placement and those shapes about right, I can go ahead and lay in this, the watercolor. Sometimes like I shared with the little yellow warbler earlier, I don't draw at all before I do the underpainting. But I found that a lot of times students like to see at least the start of a drawing or a road map. So I started doing them for instructional purposes. This is just kind of a reddish carbothello. But there again, I just get the general indicator of where things are going to be. And I may change the light pattern a bit, having the light coming in from this side here. So this area will be a little bit lighter, be darker as you get down here on the belly side and underneath the wing. And this area in here will get a little bit darker as well as down here. I think you'll see as I start to work, especially if you saw the last video, that I have a tendency of changing things a lot as I go along here. So to get this started here, now I'm going to go to my watercolors. I think I will spray this lightly with just to make the surface a little wet before I get started. I think I'll start right there in the with the bird first. You can see with this brush, with that angle on that, I can get some nice shapes. I'm going to see down here in the shadow side, maybe I'm going to see a little bit of this darker shape here coming off the wing here, and most certainly down here in the tail. I know my beak is going to be somewhere right in here. We'll bring some of this color down into here. As you notice, as I'm applying the watercolor, like I shared in the last video, I don't want to take and just go back and forth on it. I'm looking for just shapes here and how I can apply the watercolor just to give me an indicator of where I want some of these major shapes. Here I worked a little bit of the complements together with the yellow orange against the violet. Go ahead and do a little of this red down here in the tail, especially in the wing area here maybe. I think up here, top, around the eye. Let's just throw in a few hints in here. Then I'm going to come in where the eye is going to be, walk in some of these darks into here, coming down. Or maybe a few of these darks in here. I'm just putting one spot of color in to the next. Now, what I've got inside the bird, I'm going to have to start laying some of this out into here. So let's get some of these darker colors going on. As I'm working and you find you might have questions, feel free to send me an email. Drop me a note and I'll be more than happy to respond. I think after the fiasco of the Zoom thing I tried to do a while back, I've decided that I want to just try to do these more as demos, and then you can watch them at your own time if you have an interest in them. I have some stronger light coming in through here, maybe bouncing off over into here. I want this to be kind of almost bushy looking down into here with these browns. I'm going to put a little, some nice blue popping through up into some of this in here. Now, while that's still kind of wet, I'm going to take my water bottle, barely hit it there. I'm going to take a paper towel. Some of these areas I'm going to lay on here. Oh man, look at the texture there. In a few of these areas. And since this is a demo, I don't want anything really thick up there. I can also take the paper towel, scrape it a little bit. Just keeping everything kind of soft at the moment. Spray it again with a little water. Okay, now that that's dry, I'm going to start in the area here of the eye with a carbothello. Block it in. I know that this pattern will come down. I'm going to the beak. We'll use the, just to get started here, give me a feel where the beak is going to go. Then we'll start blocking in with the color. So here, we're just going to I just want to get the eye and the beak in the right spot before I start the rest of the bird. Let's get this eye ring. You can see how I can keep carving away on this shape to get it closer to where I want it to be. Uh, want that to be a little bit lighter. I want to put over here. I want to try to just a little bit over here. The reason I like some of the Carbothellos are just in these tight areas in here around the eye and the beak. I can soften these edges and hopefully I can get the right value placed in there. Some of these sticks I'm applying at the moment are just some of the harder sticks with the new pastels. Still looking just at basic placement of my colors. I do like to see them just with a little bit warmer breast here, but kind of going toward the green side. Just trying to get one spot of color in. Next. Just kind of indicate where the thinking the feet will probably come in about right here. One leg there. The other one here hanging on. Gives me an indicator now where I might have my branch. Earlier, I kind of wanted to see a little more light, maybe bouncing back into here. I'll play that down just a little heavier and a little lighter. Warm up the top of that. Now I think I'm at the stage where I'm going to come in with some pipe insulation. These are kind of chunks of pipe insulation I get at the local hardware store, Lowe's. And then I cut them up into smaller pieces. This is what they kind of look like. They come in about 8-foot sections. They open up. And I like to use these. We'll start up here in the head. I'm going to come through and start softening this color and fusing some of these shapes together. There again, this is one of those things you don't want to come on here and just go across. You want to be very selective as to where you're pushing this color and the direction you're going to push it in. For example, these feathers kind of fall down over. I'll probably try to push it into that direction. I am wiping this little piece of insulation every time I make a mark, like here, and then I wipe it off so that it's clean. Getting rid of some of the hard edges here at the top. I mean, if I got a hard edge, that's where your eye is going to most likely go. I want to keep my hard edges right in this area in here. And suggest where the rest of them go. Keep it very soft in some spots. I'm just softening the material, the edges. And then in other areas, I bear it down a lot harder on it to push it more into the tooth of the paper. Then I want to come back. I see some areas I need to have some stronger lights in. This guy a little fat, so I'm going to trim a little from him. Now I'm bearing down pretty heavy on the stick. I want to get this difference in this cooler and warmer, warmer and cooler look to hopefully bring the bird out, but I don't want to lose my light too much over on the right side. So I want to come back in and pull a little bit of that back into the picture. Come back in with the magic tool. A little more light underneath here. I think I'm going to change this just a little bit down here. Show you where that wing is. Then I'm going to come in here and carve out behind it. show where the back end might be. And let's get some of the suggestion of the feathers, not light enough. I'm just starting now to refine shapes that are smaller, smaller. Another way I can soften the shapes from Elizabeth Mowry is to take a carbothello and I can just simply just barely touching. This guy still needs to lose a little weight at the bottom. There we go. I still might cover just a little more in this area here. Now I'm going to take this to another table, show you the next stage of it. Just 1 second. A little more light here, then I'll take it over. Okay. Okay, now we have it on the other table. We're going to take some pastel with a palette knife. And I'm simply going to scrape it into some areas here. Give it more of a textured look. Okay, then I'll take it back. We'll take it back to the other table. Okay, now let's come in and clean up what I had put on here. Sometimes when you splatter, wait a minute here. Oops. Now I'm going to take and I'm going to put some cellophane on, or clear wrap, and use a brayer to push this pigment into the tooth of the paper. And when I do that, it kind of pushes it down and makes it a little wider, or yeah, I guess you could say wider, gives you a thicker little spots as it flattens them. Let's see if I still have some areas that get some different green up into here. And now I'm going to put the clear wrap back on it and push that pigment in. Yeah. So now I have some areas where I don't want the splatter. So what I can do, come in now, just take some of those out. Don't like that long branch like that. We'll fuse that little area together down here. Don't want it to be separate. I want to soften this up on the breast. think I'm going to take a little bit of a lighter tone in here. I want this to be a little bit warmer, just in this area. And coming up in here, this yellow against the violet here should make that pop even a little bit more. And a little bit of light on the side of this feathers going up. When we come back in, just with a little bit of gray. I think we'll just a little smaller. There. Get some of these blacks in that I lost during this process. Strengthen those up just a little bit. Just softening the edge. Still like that light, just a little bit stronger there. Up here. See, I keep coming back and forth. I'll lay something down and I'll just come in and soften it just a bit. Until I get the look that I'm looking for. Let's see one other little area, then I'll show you how I frame them. Let's get a little violet back down at the bottom. Sign it. So now I'm ready to frame this. I have a piece of non-glare glass. It's real shiny on one side and dull on the other. And what I want is the shiny side to go up against the image. So I have a piece of foam core cut that's exactly the same size as the glass and the painting. I'm going to take two pieces of art tape. What I'm going to do is sandwich the painting and the foam core, and sandwich the painting in between. Then I'm going to secure it in place with a piece of tape. Take the other side. And now I'm going to seal all four sides of this with a piece of art tape. I usually like to try to keep this on the same edge that I had it taped off onto the easel with. I want to push that in, make sure it's secure on that side. We'll do the top part of it. Gonna trim those edges off. Take the two pieces off that I had holding it together. Started framing like this quite a few years ago. I really got tired of all my framed pieces with mats, spacer bars, floaters, coming back from shows with pastel all over the mat and glass, and I'd have to cut new mats. This has really made it a lot easier, especially if you're sending work to shows. Once this thing is sealed, that pastel isn't going anywhere. If I need to take the glass off, it doesn't change the painting. It doesn't remove the pastel. Might be a little dust on there, but it's nothing major. I also like to send these to, when people purchase these, I like to send them in the glass. All they need to do is purchase a 6x8 frame, and it can go right in. So here is the frame I'm going to use. I simply just put this in, turn it around to the front, and check all the sides to make sure I don't see any of the tape coming through. Then I'll use a Fletcher's point gun. Secure it in the frame. Put a backing on, and then I can put the hangers and it's ready to go. This has really been a lot easier to work with pastel paintings, especially if you're shipping them, using them for shows. Well, that kind of concludes the demonstration, folks. I hope you got something out of it, and I appreciate you tuning in to take a look at it. Thank you.